people, or do you think it would increase laziness among people so that they think we just rely on the subsidies from the richer areas?
Um,
But I don't think that. But I just thought, well, it is unfair to West Germany, and
yeah,
I
they
think,
complain about
well,
it,
yeah,
decrease the
would it bring down
yeah,
the West
productivity.
Germany economy, as you know, the unification has passed for around 23 years, isn't it? And I think, and as what you have said, the East Germany has a great development already.
Some areas have.
Yeah,
Of course,
some
there are
areas.
some areas in the north which have structural problems as well. So the idea is not to stop subsidizing, but to really look at the situation in different regions and do it in a regional way. Subsidizing each other is great, and I think within this kind of Bundesländerausgleich, these subsidies among the federal states, that Bavaria has to pay something for example, North Rhine-Westphalia. This does not really, is not really a big. Of course, sometimes it comes up in the press, and but the individual maybe does not feel it so much because it's done among the kind of state budgets. But here with the solidarity tax, you see this on your tax bill every month, that this is deducted. So in a way, this is something that people maybe have. It does more personally affect them. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, what else would you suggest the German government can do more, uh, for the sake of the German economy, or maybe what kind of things she can do less for the
Let me
for the
talk about
economy?
that first. That the German government's expenditure is among the fourth largest in the world. So, do you think the German government has done a lot to improve the society or to help your family from the perspective of the citizen?
This is a very difficult question. I think from the perspective of a citizen, so for me as an educator, I think of course they should invest more into in education.
Yeah.
This is very important, not only in one region, but all over the place, to give really good education and teacher training. So this is our asset for Germany, and we have to really continue with that. And then they have to really invest into new industries, like yeah. Of course, there is always one concern, like with this magnetic train we mentioned that before, between
In
Shanghai, Pudong,
yeah,
and
yeah,
the
the
inner
electromagnetic
city.
train.
Yeah. So we had a kind of a trial course in Germany, and they tried to introduce this magnetic train in Germany to connect maybe Frankfurt and Munich or something like that. But because of environmentalists' concerns, this never could materialize. And so we have, but this is difficult. We have a very high conscience about environmental protection, and that is good. At the same time, it may hamper this kind of experimental things, because why should people buy magnetic trains from Germany if we don't even have a track in Germany ourselves? So I think we have to showcase our products a little bit and
to use it inside the country.
Inside the country. So I think they should invest much more money in improving our infrastructure and show what the technology in Germany can produce, and this will then motivate people to buy German products.
But yeah, I've heard that you have mentioned the train in Shanghai. Is it the technology of German? Is it the Shanghai government, the central government has brought the train from Germany to
from Siemens, yeah. So Siemens, the
so
company.
do you think is it possible to have some exports from Germany, like the technology? Because well, you know, China is not that developed. For example, the technology, she still relies on
the
those
Western
the
countries.
Western country like Germany, because Germany was a really a country with a great
Scientific
advancement
advancements.
in technology.
Yeah, Germany is an export nation.
Yeah.
So we live, our workplaces depend on export.
Yeah.
That is very important. And of course, when you look at markets like China, if we continue to produce top technology and develop this kind of top technology, then this can be exported. If the government doesn't invest in that, then or doesn't support this enough, then we have problems. For example, when we look at the example of coal mining in my region, so the coal mines were all closed down. One reason was because the government didn't want us to pay the subsidies anymore. But on the other hand, our coal mining industry developed one of the most modern coal mining technologies, because they had to go really deep, more than 1,000 meters. And all these machines, some of these machines were only quite new when they closed the coal mine, and of course they had been assembled down there, and they just rot in the ground. So instead of keeping these coal mines open and see them and maybe use them as showpieces for trying out new technology in coal mining, and by then this could be exported to China as well, maybe improving the industry over there.
Maybe together with the engineer there to design a new machines, that can fit the China the geographical position of China.
Right. Yeah. And when we talk about this, we are again in the field of education. Like if you want to become an engineer,
Scientist.
Scientist, but for example, Bauingenieur or Maschinenbauingenieur, so a kind of how do you call it, machine engineering, then you have to improve the secondary school system. Right now, it's very difficult for secondary schools to find teachers in teaching physics and chemistry
in Germany.
In Germany, because there are not enough graduates from the universities, and if somebody graduates from university, he will rather go into industry because he can earn so much more money instead of being a school teacher. So you have to motivate good people who are gifted in teaching the next generation to go into secondary schools and promote physics and chemistry and these kind of subjects. And it's just what I heard from my wife. Right now it's just the kind of leftovers. They go into teaching. All the really good guys, they go into industry, and then the teachers. So they have a really big shortage at her school of teachers of physics, for example. And you have to interest the next generation in these subjects if you want to really be a top performer in future in these fields, because then you want to attract these to universities and as well. At the same time, you have to attract people from all over the world to join German university education. By this, you have to promote German language overseas much more. Right?
So
we are back in my
we
field.
need your participation.
Because the language of education in all levels of education is German. In the past, especially in Eastern Europe, like the Soviet Union, German was the first foreign language they used.
They used German.
Yeah, there was not English, but German. And then after, and especially in Eastern Europe, that was strongly supported by the East German government. So they sent visiting lecturers out. They gave scholarships to students coming in to study in Germany. I met when I was in Mongolia, in Ulaanbaatar, I met people who had done their engineering degrees in East Germany. And with the unification, the German government and somebody cut all these kind of links. When before, after unification, let's say East Germany had in Ulaanbaatar, at the University of Ulaanbaatar, about 10 professorships for German, paid by the East German government. They were cut to one after unification. So instead of keeping these links and teaching the language over there, motivating students to go to Germany for further training. You can get the best performers, for example, in engineering, to do engineering degrees in Germany, and then either they continue working in Germany or they go back to their home countries. But by knowing German, by being trained in Germany, they would be maybe more willing to buy German products. Let's say if they work in a kind of whatever steel plant in mainland China, and they have been trained in Germany and they have to buy new machinery, maybe they would rather buy the German product because they know that better, or feel more familiar with that, or trust it more from the quality point of view than, let's say, something which was produced in South Korea. So therefore, this is all in some interlinked.
That means the exports of the German culture is important.
Yeah, it's important too, and I think this is something the government has totally neglected after unification. Before unification, there was a kind of competition between East and West Germany, and both tried to
have more power around the country.
They have more influence, and by this they invested in overseas to promote their culture, their system, and attract by this students from overseas as well. And I think this has totally stopped. So right now, in the former Soviet Union, so Russia and the other kind of following states of the Soviet Union, I think German is almost an exotic language. So they study English as their first language. So then going for further degrees, they would rather go to the US instead of going to our really good engineering schools like in Aachen University, which is world famous. So they have now problems attracting international students. So if you want to study in Germany, it's very easy as an international student because we have a target of 20% of international students, but the university can't fill this. Universities usually can't fill this because of the language gap. It takes a long time to reach a level that you can study in German, using the German language. Of course, there is another way. You can just change the whole system and teach in English, and that is
but
what
that would be
but they try. Yeah, it's of course in a globalized world, there are more and more degree programs taught in English. But if you want to sell German technology and so on, I think this is all interconnected.
So, any more questions?
I have some questions about education. Do you think the German economy or the education system focus on different prospects other than like the traditional Chinese? That means you have taught in Chinese
is there any great difference between the German education and the traditional Chinese education?
Because the traditional Chinese
that may be two different styles.
Yeah. It's quite focused on memorizing and just having students to be trained to be taught. But do you think the German?
Of course, I have not really been in the secondary education system in China. I just was at the university, and it's already different. I think one big objective of German education is this kind of development of independent thinking and analysis, so that you really independently analyze issues and come to your own conclusion instead of maybe what you mentioned, rote learning. And the system until recently, until about 5 years ago, for example, we didn't have centralized A-level exams in North Rhine-Westphalia, in the state of North Rhine-Westphalia. And there was, the idea is if you have a centralized A-level exam, you come more into the prospect that you study for the exam instead of studying because you want to master the topic. And 5 years ago, the university, the government in North Rhine-Westphalia started to do centralized examinations. So that means now teachers, I know this from my wife, they teach, let's say, in German studies, which is literature-based, they teach anticipating what will be the exam. Nobody knows, of course, because it's done by the ministry. And all the teachers now are trying to prepare the students for the exam.
Exam oriented.
Yeah, it's very exam oriented. Before, the system was like that. You had a certain kind of, you had a curriculum, and within this curriculum the teacher had a certain freedom. Of course, you have to always
stick on to the curriculum.
Yeah, you have to stick, and you have to in some way achieve the learning outcomes that are set there, but you have more freedom. And then in the end, before the when the A-levels or Abitur was done, the teacher was designing the A-level exam. So for his course in the upper secondary school. So then the teacher was designing, I think, 2 or 3 exams, and he had to send them to the Ministry of Education of the state, and they checked if the level is okay, and then they choose one of the 3, and he didn't know which one they choose. But in the end, this was based on what he was teaching. And now they teach on what they think an exam may be. So, and I think this is very similar to the Hong Kong system and all kinds of centralized examination systems.
Would the German teachers still participated in the designing of the exam paper now?
No.
No.
This is done by the ministry. Of course, teachers are doing this there. It's not the officials are doing this, but they don't know what will be the exam. And by this, for example, before the teachers had a certain freedom. So, for example, about literature, there was okay. You have to read 2 dramas and 3 novels and a set of poems, poetry. Now every student in North Rhine-Westphalia gets a kind of syllabus, and the whole generation reads the same novels, the same dramas, and because there will be examinations on that. And I think this is a bad development. I think it is much better if you don't study for an exam, but you study because you want to master, you want to understand the content and go in depth.
Do you think this kind of having a centralized exam just affect the German students' creativity?
Yeah, I think it does affect the creativity. It was actually a reaction to what we called the PISA crisis. You know, PISA, the international comparison of school leavers' kind of proficiency. The PISA test, which was not done by an educational institution, but by the OECD, the Organization of Economical Cooperation and Development.
You just compare the performance by the series.
No, they did kind of general tests within age groups all over the world. And by comparing the performance of German school children, they had the idea that Germans were less performing or less well performing than students in Japan, Korea. Hong Kong, for example, is always on top of these PISA study in mathematics. So, but actually, to me, changing our system is a totally wrong reaction to that, because you first have to see why do they perform so well, because I think the German students were not so much used to this kind of testing. So, our government officials responsible for education, I hear that about Hong Kong government officials as well, are very fast at jumping to some kind of action when they think there is something wrong or something not going well enough, and then they start reforms without really thoroughly looking into the matter.
Back to the point that this kind of exams, testing, oriented education, it hamper the development of German.
It does stifle all kinds of creativity, and students are really just thinking of what will be the question in the end. I have to answer, not really thinking about, do I understand this issue, and maybe do I look at this issue from many different kind of perspectives. And I think that was the system before. So this is a negative development.
I think that maybe that's time for today.
Yeah,
Thank you for your participation here.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Danke.
Bitte sehr.
What is German for thank you?
Bitte.
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 Danke.
You first say danke and then I would say bitte.
Danke.
Yeah.
I said danke.
Ja, nicht zu danken.
Dankeschön.
Okay.